Good afternoon. Before we start, may I ask all the students to shut down your cell phones. I am assuming that the rest will do it on their own. Thank you. I am Gil Santos. I'm your MC this afternoon, and my job is so simple, short, and sweet. I will go on with the house rules before we turn it over for the national anthem, and then immediately after the speaker, I'm going to turn over the podium to our moderator, Dr. Florina Aurelios Juan, who is going to take over from there and close down the event. May I acknowledge the presence of Mrs. Sanaida Quezon Abansenya and family. She is the only surviving daughter of our late and beloved Commonwealth President Manuel L. Quezon. He passed away in Saranac Lake before he could see the end of the war in the Pacific. May I also acknowledge the presence of our chair, Mrs. Lorna P. Laurel, and the president of LGU Manila and Cavite, Mr. Bobby Laurel. My third object of acknowledgement are the War II survivors and veterans. If there are any who would like to be acknowledged later because maybe we just missed them, I would ask you later to please present yourself, because the survivors are the following. Mrs. Lourdes Reyes Montinola, who is both the president, the chairman emeritus of Far Eastern University, and a daughter of and survivor of the last war and last Battle of Manila. We also have Ambassador Miguel Perez Rubio, who served several presidents in Malacanang. We also have Mrs. Leslie Murray, Ambassador John Rocha, who is a survivor of the Battle of Manila. Miss Janet Clemo, she here. Mr. Clemo was a member of the Manila Overseas Press Club, and I had the pleasure of meeting him. We also have Ambassador Isabel Caro Wilson. And Mr. Angel Hernando, and who was a surgeon during the war in Manila, and he had to do all the running around. But I never called him Veterakbo. I knew him for 50 years, Mr. Larry Henares. If there's anybody I didn't mention in the list, could you please rise and be acknowledged? Okay. My old friend, Dr. Biniting Legarda, I knew him when he was in the Central Bank at that time. May I also acknowledge the members of the Academe and members of the Diplomatic Corps, if they are here. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Philippine National Anthem. Please rise.
magiliw, pero sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupi, di ka pasisingin. Sa dagatang mundo, sa simula, sa langit bumaba, may dinatang-tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang isa't ang matawad mo'y tabi, ay nanandinig. Ang ituwing na araw na kanya, pag may di magdidilim, lupa ng araw na malhalit pagsinta. Kaya langit sabihin mo, ang hidaya na pag may mga pirang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please take a seat. May I now call on Mr. John Silva to introduce our speaker this afternoon.
Distinguished guests, I want to thank the Laurel Memorial Foundation and the Lyceum Education Consortium for going in a co-sponsorship of Mr. James Zobel's talk here in the Philippines. We are very grateful for that, and I think in a few minutes you'll understand why. I think Mr. Zobel is an incredible storyteller, and I think historians need to be good storytellers. The Ortigas Library has 20,000 volumes. Mr. Rafa Ortigas, the founder, felt that it was important for Filipinos to really know their history, and in fact, even to rewrite it if necessary. And again, that is why we chose Mr. Zobel to speak on a subject that is important, that is the role of Filipino leaders in World War II, and in particular, President Jose P. Laurel. History for colonized countries always needs reviewing, given the portrayal of its people by the colonizers. The first written description of Pacific peoples by the coming Spaniards we were labeled ladrones or thieves. It was alleged that the natives stole, but no record of the natives' version exists. Therefore, the Spanish account becomes historical truth found in libraries throughout the world. Overlooked are their own Spanish accounts about their callous disregard for the natives, their drunken behavior, their arbitrary detention of people, and of course the demands for submission, as in the case of Lapu-Lapu, resulting in the killing of Magellan and the fleet and his fleet chased out of Cebu. The antiseptic Spanish version of that arrival, locked in our school book memories, was the beautiful solemn mass on the shores of Limasawa and the baptizing of the local king and queen. Magellan's death was a total misunderstanding. In the numerous uprisings, revolts, and eventual revolution against the Spanish colonial government, those who demanded equity, justice, and fundamental changes in the country were given various names, including insurgentes, traidores, tulisanes, and demonios. When the Americans proceeded to go to war against the Filipinos, historical accounts for the longest time made no mention of it. They called it the Spanish-American War, and if there was a brief chapter on Philippine participation, it would be called an insurrection with insurgents, fanatics, puramentados, and outlaws. Colonial powers have a penchant to pride themselves in making sure the population they administer are friendly, loyal, and accepting. So here comes 1941, and the Japanese conquerors taking over their American colony, the Philippines. Each power has a reason for existence and domination. Japan wanted to free the peoples of Asia from Western colonial domination, assuring a prosperity sphere for those under them. The United States, on the other hand, will not accept the takeover of their presence in the Philippines and their influence in Asia. They are not only the bearers of prosperity, but also the democratic light and the harbinger of freedom. They will fight to recover the lost colony. In the interim, 10 million Filipinos caught in the crossfire needed to be administered for its continued well-being as resources are dramatically reduced. The departing President Quezon instructs trusted men like Jose P. Laurel to take the reins of government and help its people. A new republic is formed, branded by historians and propagandists as a puppet republic. The term is exacerbated given that a large group of Filipinos will fight as guerrillas throughout the occupation and will see the puppet government as aiding and abetting the conquerors. The victorious Japanese conquerors have the upper hand in the islands and for propaganda purposes describe people as they wish. Those in the new puppet republic are fervent, quote, friends of the Japanese people. They spare no effort to use them as propaganda pawns to enlist other Filipinos to join them. The efforts, though, are a failure given the maltreatment and brutality of the Japanese towards the rest of the people. And yet, someone had to run the government. When the tide turns, the Americans return. The name-calling goes into high gear. Those who participated with the Japanese were now called collaborators and sent to temporary detention in Japan. Ironically, those who fought the Japanese, some allying with the American forces at war's end, were promised compensation and honors, but up to today received little to none of both. Many Class A and B Japanese war criminals escaped prosecution. Many who were as barbaric as Yamashita or Toho. Emperor Hirohito, who is responsible for the deaths of over 1 million Filipinos, is not prosecuted and allowed to retain his title. The hundreds of thousands of sexually abused women of Asia in the hands of the Japanese soldiers still have not received the compensation deserved. The lesson here is that the victor may write the history and name and brand people at will, but their domination is capricious, not just, without reason, and inconsistent. It is now 70 years since liberation, 69 of which has been as a fledgling republic. We can no longer finger blame the long-gone colonizers. We need to review the appellations and the name callings that are stuck in our history books. We can begin with hearing historians like James Sobel, with his access to the MacArthur Library, to its files, where documents, letters, books reside, much unread or digested, to figure out what really went into the colonizers' heads before, during, and after the occupation of the Philippines. President Jose P. Laurel, the third president of the Philippines, and the president of the Second Republic needs a reappraisal. Let's hear it from what has been gathered at the MacArthur Library. May I call on James Sobel.
Do you have a clicker for the PowerPoint? All right. Thanks, y'all. Thanks to the Lyceum University. Thanks to the Jose P. Laurel Memorial Foundation. Thanks to the Ortigas Library. Thanks to the Bayleaf Hotel for having me here. I really appreciate it. And it's really been a great trip. It's my third one here in the Philippines. And I really think that this has been kind of crazy because I've had to do, I think, 6 different talks. I'm not sure what day it is. I know it's the 16th, but exactly what day it is, I'm not sure. Most of what I've seen has been the inside of a hotel room and looking at the computer. Now, just to forestall any questions about anything, no, I am not related to Don Jaime Sobel. If I was, I would probably be down on Boracay and not here right now. It's funny because the name Sobel has always been known in my family from the Philippines because my great uncle came here during World War II. Now he's just a lowly private and he lands at Nielsen Field in 1945. And there's a guy there with a sign that says Zobel. And he's never seen Zobel anywhere, so he goes up to him, well, I'm Zobel. And so they throw him in the car and they take him to the Zobel de Ayala mansion, and all of a sudden he's like, I think you've got the wrong Zobel. So it's always been known, very much so in our family, how it relates to everything. Past 20 years, I've worked at the tomb of General MacArthur. It's housed in the old 1850 City Hall building of Norfolk. And in 1960, because Norfolk is the home of Douglas MacArthur's mother, Mary Pinckney Hardy, they offered it to him. Now, MacArthur had been offered to have all of his stuff at West Point, the Smithsonian University or institution, but MacArthur, I think, knew with Norfolk it was going to be the closest thing to a presidential library he was ever going to get. And so he agreed to the deal and said he would actually come there and dedicate a memorial to myself. Kind of fits in with Douglas MacArthur. But he promised to be there alive or dead. Died right before, kept his promise. And so it is the tomb of General MacArthur as well as Jean MacArthur, his second wife. April 11th, 1964, MacArthur was buried in the MacArthur Memorial, 13 years to the day after he gets fired by President Truman. He had been dead for 7 days. He died on April 5th, 1964, laid in state in Washington, New York, laid in state right in the memorial, and 87,000 people came through to see him. About 2 o'clock in the morning, the night before he's going to be buried, all of a sudden his eyes opened up. And everyone's like, ah! Running out of the memorial because he needed to go in the ground. Jean, his wife, lived to be 101. Lived in 3 centuries. We buried her on January 26, 2000, General MacArthur's birthday. Just kind of worked out that way. Jean had a special deal to live at the Waldorf Astoria. It cost about $3,000 a night. They had some goofy deal where they had to pay $300 a month. They didn't expect Jean to live to be 101. When we buried her, no one was there because she outlived everybody she ever knew. Now, it is kind of a mecca, the MacArthur Memorial, and one of the first people that came was President Diosdado Macapagal, and this is him coming there in 1964. It's a joint venture. It's owned by the city of Norfolk. It's a city museum. It does not get state funds. It does not get federal funds. It gets pretty much everything from the General Douglas MacArthur Foundation, which collects funds. This is our brand new visitor center, which we just built a couple of years ago. This is where I work, Jean MacArthur Research Center. It's the home to the MacArthur Archives, about 30,000 books, over 2 million documents, all the papers of Douglas MacArthur, 18 of his generals, thousands of collections that have been donated there because they know we're going to take care of it. Acid-free, temperature, humidity controlled, everything's going to be in perpetuity because that's what MacArthur signed the deal with Norfolk. You will have it free and open to the public. You'll never be able to charge a dime, and the city of Norfolk can't stand us just because of that. We get about 5,000 researchers a year. I'm the only one there. Job security. Now this is one of our great and foremost visitors. You'll see Dr. Jose right there. That creature on the right, that's me. That's the way I usually look. My handlers have been kind of amazed that I show up in a suit because that's me. I'm not a historian. I'm an archivist. I collect things. I hunt people down to give me their stuff. That's why I first came to the Philippines in 2009, was to go to Pete Parsons' house and hold him captive until he gave us all of Chick Parsons' materials. So basically for the past 20 years, I've sat in front of a computer and cataloged things. And that's why I say I'm not a historian. You will not hear any opinions from me today. You'll only hear what I've seen. And I brought everything with me. And I'm going to donate that to the Lyceum University so anybody will be able to come there and see all of it. MacArthur and Laurel. Perspective of the war years. People, that's what they've been asked to come here and talk about. There's a great deal, wealth of information within the MacArthur Memorial that deals with this whole perspective. And as John Silva said, the collaboration issue. The problem is that everything owned by Douglas MacArthur prior to World War II all gets destroyed in the Manila Hotel. in 1945. When he came here in 1935 as military advisor, he brought everything with him. He didn't expect to go back to the United States. Even brought his 84-year-old mother with him, who died as soon as she got here. Manila was home. Mom dies here. His dad's best years as military governor are here. He meets his wife, Jean MacArthur, here. His one and only son, Arthur MacArthur, is born here. Manila is home. And he's not a colonial. I mean, everybody he mixes with are Filipinos. He met all these people early on. His first time in the Philippines was 1903, and that's where he first meets Quezon and Osmeña, was in 1903. You'll see this picture. This is MacArthur's third tour when he's head of the Philippine department. And there you'll see Quezon, Osmeña, Rojas, Carino, 4 presidents of the Philippines. This is who MacArthur mixes with. He and Jean, this is their set. This is who they go with. And that's what I mean. Even though everything's been destroyed, we know that MacArthur knew Laurel beforehand. One of the only messages I have from the early period is when MacArthur gets recalled to the colors as USAFE commander, July 41, and there's a letter that comes from Laurel saying congratulations to him. So we know that they mixed. We know that they mingled together. And then comes the issue of collaboration. Now, Douglas MacArthur has been called one of the most egotistical people that ever crossed the face of the planet. There's a guy named Enoch Crowder. He worked for Douglas MacArthur's father, Arthur, and he worked for Douglas MacArthur. And he said Arthur MacArthur was the most arrogant man he ever met, until he met his son, Douglas MacArthur. But even the cynics knew MacArthur's mind. They knew this guy was brilliant. Eisenhower even said so. Eisenhower could not stand Douglas MacArthur. When they were here in the 30s, MacArthur eventually found out that Eisenhower was imitating him at parties. But Eisenhower said if you had a room full of the smartest people and Douglas MacArthur walked into the room, everybody knows he's the smartest guy in the room. That's what these guys think of him. Now, Douglas MacArthur graduates #1 at West Point, youngest brigadier general in the American Army of World War I, 7 Silver Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, 2 Croix de Guerres, youngest major general, youngest superintendent of West Point, youngest chief of staff ever, architect of victory. Well, you can understand why he had a big ego. But on this question, I think with collaboration, you'll see as we finish today that this is where MacArthur is at his best. And all he's doing throughout this issue is the will and the whim of Manuel Quezon to protect the Filipinos for the Philippines and to keep America out of their business. Now, MacArthur was called back to the colors in July of 41, becomes head of the USAFE command. Jose P. Laurel is asked to join Quezon's government, Secretary of Justice, in the fall of 1941. These two are on parallel lines. They will both be in the spotlight when war comes. December 7th, 1941, the Japanese sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. They had gone to Washington. They were going to deliver the war note right when the attack happened, but they failed in that mission, and so it is a sneak attack. 8 hours later, you know what happened. Clark Field, 17 of the bombers wiped out. Air power's gone. 2 days later, Cavite's wiped out. Now you've lost your air and naval power, and it's only the Filipino Army, Philippine Scouts, and a handful of Americans that are here to defend the Philippines. 19 December, the Japanese land at Lingayen Gulf, making moves not only there, but further south of Manila, and will start the pressure cooker onto Manila. USAFE's overwhelmed. They were unprepared. It was America's fault. It was a sacrifice command to them. MacArthur from 35 to 41 was telling, I need stuff, I need materials, you promised me everything, you promised me money, and none of it was forthcoming. So when they get caught in December of 1941, it's pretty much a done issue already. Plus, MacArthur had changed the plans right before the war to defend on the beaches rather than to go to Warplane Orange, retreat back to Bataan Corregidor, hold Manila Bay till the Navy comes. But the Navy wasn't coming. They had been destroyed at Pearl Harbor. Marikina, what was said? Now, MacArthur tells Quezon on December 12th, this is only a few days after the war has begun, that you got to be ready at any time to go to Corregidor. Quezon doesn't want to go to Corregidor, but this is going to be an issue that not only the president, but Stimson, as well as High Commissioner Sayer, are going to force or plead to Quezon to understand, just go there till the time comes, and then we'll redeem the Philippines, keep the Philippine government whole. Quezon knows he's going. All the cabinet wants to go with him. They don't want to stay here and face the Japanese, but there's only a handful that can be taken. Now, Laurel is told first off that he'll be one of the ones that goes. But then that position goes to Jose Abad Santos to go to Corregidor. And so at the Marikina meetings, Laurel's asking, what are we supposed to do when the Japanese come in? Now, Vargas said, Jose Vargas, Manuel Quezon's main administrator, said he had a meeting with MacArthur, and MacArthur said, you have to do what the Japanese say according to the Hague Convention, but don't sign the oath of allegiance. Now, this is going to be what they go by, what they say their whole modus operandi is throughout that early stage, as well as the whole occupation of the Philippines. MacArthur will say he never had that meeting. There's a guy named Steinberg, David Steinberg, wrote about the collaboration issue, wrote MacArthur in 1961, asked him, did you give them that instructions? MacArthur said, no, I never gave them that instructions. Now, MacArthur's known to lie. But there's also a sense of, it's not a lie if you believe it. So we don't really know. I tend to believe Vargas and Laurel that yes, MacArthur gave him, it wasn't an official meeting, but probably just an offhand comment that comes from MacArthur. Eventually they do have to go back to War Plan Orange. They're going to retreat to Bataan, Corregidor, hold Manila Bay, and then MacArthur tells Quezon that we are going to leave right now. We're going over to Corregidor. Like I said, most of the cabinet wants to go with them, but they're going to have to stay here. And Quezon's last words to Laurel is, I want you to stay here with Vargas. Help the people. Be the cushion against the Japanese oppression. And so these are the situation they're caught in. Manila's declared an open city to protect it, to keep it from being destroyed, like the Japanese should have done in 1945. Quezon's order, open city. And then the Japanese come in. That's what I say, left to the Japanese to help the people. This is Vargas with Homa, Maeda, Japanese administration, Major General Hayashi, Jitaro Kihara used to be consul here. These are the guys who come to Vargas and tell him, you are going to have to set up this executive commission to be working at the whim of the Japanese. All the former cabinet get together, try to come up with a plan as to what they're going to do, and the Japanese pretty much say, there is no plan of what you're going to do. You're going to do what we tell you to do.